Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. So the priority today is the first beautiful day we've had during winter. We are going to be cleaning up our perennials. And what I forgot about, and I always forget every year, is that with this beautiful weather in the spring comes lots of wind. And so I may not be doing a whole lot of talking while I'm doing the perennial cleanup. And if I do want to say something and the wind's blowing pretty hard, I may come to a sheltered area. It's just the way it blew in all this warm weather, and now it's very windy outside. So I got my pruners. I may break out my hedge trimmers to trim down some grasses. I'm not going to be doing my lavender cleanup today. I like to wait on my lavender and rosemary because it's such a woody perennial until I see some new growth on there, because I wanted to stay a little protected until all of our cold weather is gone, and I know warmer days are definitely coming. We still have at least 2 months until our last frost date probably, and so I don't want to jeopardize the health of my lavender hedge because it's been in the ground 3 years now, and if I have to replace one of them, it's going to look really odd. So we're going to do lavender probably in at least another month. We'll see how it progresses and how warm the days are, and if it's getting warmer earlier than it usually does, I may prune it a little earlier. So I was surveying the yard this morning just to see what all I wanted to do, and there's actually not as much as I thought there was going to be. If you can hear the beautiful birds, it is so exciting. The weather's so warm, just so you know. I'm really excited about it. And so I'm going to do what I can. Like I said, we still have 2 months, and so there's not a whole lot that I have to get done today, but I like to get this stuff cleaned up as quickly as I can in the spring, simply because leftover foliage and stuff like that can harbor insects, bugs, and disease, and we want to get that stuff out of our garden before our perennials and shrubs and roses and everything else starts actually growing and blooming. And so I picked up another kangaroo pop-up bag from Amazon the other day. I've had mine for over 3 years. I think it's at least 3 years old, and it's still usable. The little wire at the top's coming out a little bit where it's been rubbed a little too much, and so I got one to replace it. It was $20. I'll put a link below. This has been an indispensable tool for garden cleanup. I'm going to start putting my rose debris directly in a trash can instead of in this, and it looks like I actually bought a different one. So this is a soft bottom one. The one I had previously was a hard bottom one, so we'll see how long this one stands up. I prefer the one that's got a hard bottom because you can drag it around on the ground. I can still use my other one if I need to, and I'm going to be doing any dragging around, but I really love this tool. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to clean up is the coneflowers and a lot of these little perennial other things I have around here. So I want to get this done really early because perennials start coming out of the ground during winter, and you can't see right here behind this coneflower, but I'll show you in a minute. I don't want to be cutting on that nice foliage, so we're going to get all of the stuff down so I don't have to trim it later. Coneflowers can be cut directly to the ground, no special treatment there. One of the benefits of leaving your coneflowers through winter are these beautiful seed heads right here, which provide winter interest, but also give the birds something to snack on over winter. So I like to knock all of these off on the ground so they'll self-seed a little bit. That coneflower specifically is Cheyenne Sky, which I really love. You don't really know exactly what you're going to get. They're either orange, red, or yellow, and I happen to end up with a red and yellow one. I don't love red in my garden. I may end up moving this red one to a different location just because it's kind of conflicting with the other color palette I'm going to have right here, but we'll see. We'll see. My irises that I put in the ground last year from Shriners are looking really good. They're actually starting to get new foliage on them. That's another thing I need to clean up today. And some perennials, because they've been sitting all winter, you can just pull their foliage off, but others you definitely need to trim at risk of pulling up the roots. So after I get everything cleaned up adequately, I'll come through and scratch around the mulch to even it out a little more so it's not as bumpy. We have a really bad frost heave cycle in Ohio, and it just wrecks the mulch over winter. Another problem with our frostive is these landscape staples constantly come out of the ground over winter, and I always am having to push them back into the ground. So I have a lot of daylilies right here behind me. I've shown in garden tours before. This was kind of a daylily patch with lots of different varieties. I'm going to be moving those. I may wait until fall to do that. I will pull up the ones I need to assemble the perennial border there, but I will probably leave some of those till fall. Daylilies transplant really easy any time of the year. They're really hardy, really drought resistant. Their foliage might turn a little brown, but they're really easy to deal with. It will come back very easily. And so the leaves are already starting to pop out of the ground a little bit. They typically do pretty early. And so I'm going to clean up all of that foliage. And then as I see them bloom and I realize what bloom color they are, so it'll be probably June-ish, May, June, I'll dig those up and transplant them elsewhere in the garden. Perennial grasses, you just want to leave a little bit of the stalk or the stems above the ground. And actually you could save this for decoration if you wanted to, but it has really beautiful blue foliage throughout the year and really beautiful seed heads. So if you wanted to keep that for decoration inside for a dried arrangement, you could. Perennial daylilies are also just really easy to clean up because the foliage turns to junk and you can literally just pull it up, no cutting involved. And that's why I like to do it before new foliage starts emerging from the ground. And I'll come in with a tiny rake this afternoon after I get these beds cleaned up and tidy up just leftover stems and sticks from this daylily foliage. But for now, a quick cleanup is all I'm looking to do. The lamium that I planted over here, if you remember, I potted up a Proven Winners Cascade hydrangea, which is a new type of hydrangea, to the market last year in a white container, and I added lamium around it as a decorative annual. I pulled all of those things out of the container in late October or late September and planted them in the ground. And so the lamium is a really beautiful ground cover. It can be kind of aggressive, but I think it can be controlled pretty well. And as I mentioned, one of the things I'm focusing on this year are ground covers, so I don't have to mulch as much. So I think it'll be a beautiful contrast next to these other shrubs and perennials I have here. If you see anything in its winter form that you want to know what it is, drop it in the comments with a timestamp and I'll let you know if I can remember the variety type. This is Midnight Masquerade Penstemon, and it is one of the ones that starts coming from the ground a little earlier and actually has some evergreen foliage. And so another reason you want to get out here and early and clean up your perennials. It also has beautiful seed heads that can be dried for arrangements. These don't look so great because they've been out here all winter, but if you cut them down in the fall, you have these beautiful seed heads, and I actually have some saved inside for dried arrangements. This penstemon may get moved to the perennial border as well. This area is going to get more and more shady as the seasons progress and this willow gets larger and these hydrangeas get larger. So it's something that may need a little more sun sooner rather than later. I have some pretty randomly placed 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 back here that's also going to get moved. So 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 is kind of a woody perennial similar to lavender, and so I cut it down very similar to lavender, just a few inches from the ground. Don't cut it off at the very bottom because that's where it branches, but just like that is good. I grew this 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 from seed. I don't know the specific variety type, but I'll tell you it did really well from seed. So if you're interested in growing 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 from seed, I'd highly recommend it. Instead of raking, I will probably come through in a few more weeks and blow all of this debris into the yard and run over it with my mulching mower. So I had a viewer asking me if I'd seen any bulbs come up yet or start showing their heads. And the answer is no. Typically I would have by now. This is really the first winter that we've had that I would consider like a normal winter, where it's been pretty consistently cold, even if it's not been the coldest winter ever. So sometimes I have them sneaking up in January, and then the little tips of them just stay there for months, but I have not seen any bulb development yet, which means the alliums that I planted down here around these roses may not have made it because of the clay soil. We'll see. It's still a little early. Alliums specifically get started a little late, so I'm not too concerned yet, and if they don't come up, I will put some more things there this year. One of the things I am going to be focusing on as well this year is bulbs. That's not something that I've done a whole lot in my garden because I have been expanding it significantly. So typically you want to go in the order of trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, and bulbs when you're planting. And so because I've been expanding, I have just started putting in shrubs this year as perennials. And after I get the perennials in the spring, bulbs will come this fall, because I really want to incorporate lots of daffodils in groupings around the entire backyard. I really love daffodils, and it's not something that I have a whole lot of. I do have some tulips, but they kind of struggle in our wet soil, and so daffodils is going to be the route I go for. If you have any recommendations for bulbs that have done really well in your clay soil, drop them below, because I will be looking for those over the coming spring and making decisions on what I'm going to order for fall. Now, I want to take you up front and show you the Hellebores and the lungwort, because it's just now starting to get leaves on it, and the Hellebores have progressed a little bit more and are going to be blooming in the next several weeks probably. So this right here is lungwort, and it's by far the worst possible plant name. Don't you agree? It's not like the beautiful magical baby's breath. Lungwort sounds like a disease. So lungwort blooms in the spring, so you can see the buds here and the new foliage shooting out. So we're going to remove all of this brown first. I have a few plants here. They are primarily part sun to shade plants, and so you don't want to stick these out into your sunny areas because they will not love it, let's just say. So we're going to clean up all this brown, and I'm going to try to avoid these buds because I don't want to cut them off. This is an area of the garden that I have a lot of issues with holding water when we have a lot of rainstorms. The front yards slope down this way, and then the side yards kind of slope this way as well. And so this area can sometimes sit in water. And these do actually pretty good here. I may have lost, well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I bought 5 of them. So I still have all the original ones I planted 3 years ago. So they're doing pretty good despite that wet, occasionally wet weather we have. And this is the variety name. It's called Raspberry Splash. Let's see. It's by Terra Nova Nurseries. So as a pairing, I've mixed these Raspberry Splash lungwort with my Hellebore. And so you can see these beautiful buds coming up right here and all the new foliage coming up in the center. So what you want to redo is remove your old Hellebore foliage just by snipping it off at the ground here. They are semi-evergreen in my area, but the foliage just looks really bad by spring, and it pushes all new foliage in late winter anyway, and so we just get that out of here. This one right here is looking a little rough. It's significantly reduced in size since I got it, but it's got one tiny bloom there. It may need a little more mulch, and there's not any drip that directly runs to it since this is all on a hill, so I may have to address that in spring. So that cleanup is done. It's not perfect, but it looks good enough that these Hellebores will bloom out good in spring and cover up any rough looking foliage. One thing next that I need to do is clean up the leftover hostas that I didn't get to. Typically you want to prune your hostas in spring, but I got really lazy at the end of the fall because I was doing so much getting all those shrubs in the ground. So we're going to clean up a few of those hostas. And one thing I wanted to mention is all of this drip tubing that you see. We had a really unusual frost heave cycle, and I think it's just because we had a regular winter, or more regular winter than usual. And a lot of this drip tubing completely popped out of the ground. But we also did not mulch this area last year, I don't think, so that's also part of the reason. But you can see a lot of roots of plants and perennials that I need to go through and start cleaning up and mulching on top of. So those are protected come spring. So I typically go through and delicately trim this 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 with hand pruners. I'm going to try the weed eater this spring to get the job done quicker because it can be super tedious, and this 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 is bigger than it was in prior years. The wind's getting pretty bad. So I'm going to set this down and we'll see how this works out. Hopefully it is quick and painless job, and it will get all of this dead cleaned up before the new starts pushing growth. Well, this looks absolutely brutal, doesn't it? There's no turning back now, so we're just going to finish it up. It looks like it's already started growing a little bit. That will be fine. If I need to come through and like finally clean up and tip any ends come spring, I'll do that. But for now, this will hopefully be a quick solution that if it works well, I will continue for years to come. All right, once again, not perfect, not looking for perfect, looking to get off a majority of the dead because the new fresh growth will cover that. If you're concerned about the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 is super tough. Actually, this 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, all of it around this border, I divided into tiny little sprigs from 2 clumps of 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 that were like right here around behind this pot here. And actually this past year, 4 years later, at least 4 years later, this will be 5 years later, it started coming back. There was no evidence of it there, but I must have left a tiny sprig of roots and it has returned. And so let me show you that. So here it is, you can see it, and that just needs to be removed, or I could leave it at this point. It's not a big deal, but these are the hostas that I left that I need to continue cleaning up. Not a whole lot here. This will be quickly to remove because I'll just pull out of the ground like the Daylilies. So that's my next step. If you have a recommendation for a ground cover that likes shade and also dry conditions, let me know. I can hardly grow anything under these blue spruces or any of these spruces because they're so massive. Stays really dry because the spruce sucks up a lot of the water, and although I have drip, I can't really expand this section anymore because I've exceeded the capacity of it. So if you have any recommendations for dry, shade, ground covers, let me know. All right, everyone. I've been working for about 2 hours and I'm a little tired, so I'm going to run in and grab lunch. This is going to wrap up this video. As I mentioned, I'll be pruning the lavender hedge right here in another month or so when we start seeing some green. I'm not seeing hardly any growth pushed yet, and I don't want to be trimming it before I see that. So the roses will be in the next video. So like, follow, subscribe, whatever you do to follow along for that. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Bye.